The Old Testament contains one of the most disturbing stories in the Bible, found in Judges 19-21. This story is unsettling and not suitable for all audiences, as it can evoke trauma. It offers several crucial life lessons, and today we will explore them together. First, I'll narrate the story, and afterward, we'll reflect on the insights we can draw from it. The story begins in Judges 19:1, during a time when there was no king in Israel. A Levite man from the northern region of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. However, she became unfaithful to him and returned to her father's house, where she stayed for 4 months. Determined to reconcile, the Levite traveled to Bethlehem to retrieve her. When he arrived, the woman's father welcomed him warmly. Each time the Levite tried to leave, the father persuaded him to stay one more day. This continued for several days, but eventually, the Levite insisted on returning home with his concubine. As they traveled north, they neared Jebus, Jerusalem. His servant suggested they stop for the night, but the Levite refused, saying he would not stay in a city occupied by non-Israelites. Instead, they pressed on toward Gibeah in the territory of Benjamin. However, when they reached Gibeah, no one invited them to stay. Finally, an old man found them in the city square and offered them shelter, showing them the hospitality expected in Israelite culture. That night, while they were resting, a group of wicked men from Gibeah surrounded the house and demanded the old man hand over the Levite so they could assault him sexually. The old man pleaded with them, urging them not to commit such an evil act. In desperation, he offered them his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. The men refused to listen, so the Levite forced his concubine outside. The men abused and violated her throughout the night, only releasing her at dawn. In the morning, the concubine collapsed at the doorstep of the house. When the Levite woke up, he opened the door, found her lying there, and told her to get up so they could leave. But she from the abuse she endured. The Levite placed her body on his donkey and took her home. Upon arrival, he did something shocking. He dismembered her body into 12 pieces and sent one piece to each tribe of Israel, exposing the atrocity committed by the men of Benjamin. This horrific act outraged the other tribes, leading them to gather as one to demand justice. They asked the tribe of Benjamin to hand over the wicked men responsible for the crime. However, the Benjamites refused, defending the criminals instead. This refusal sparked a civil war between the 11 tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin. The battle was fierce and brutal. Thousands of lives were lost on both sides. In the end, the Israelites defeated the Benjamites, leaving only 600 Benjamite men alive. Now, a new problem arose. With so few survivors and no women left among them, the tribe of Benjamin faced extinction. The other tribes, despite their anger, didn't want one of Israel's 12 tribes to disappear entirely. To address the issue, the Israelites devised a solution. They attacked the town of Jabesh Gilead, killing all the men and married women but sparing 400 virgin women. These women were given to the Benjamites as wives. However, with 200 Benjamite men still without wives, the problem persisted. To resolve this, the Israelites came up with another plan. They told the Benjamites to kidnap women during a festival in Shiloh. This way, the Israelites could avoid breaking their vow of not willingly giving their daughters to the Benjamites. During the festival, the Benjamites abducted 200 women and took them as wives, ensuring the survival of their tribe. This tragic series of events reveals several important lessons that are still relevant today. Now, let's explore these lessons one by one. Lesson 1: The danger of living without accountability. In Judges 19:1, we learn that this story takes place during a time when there was no king in Israel. Without leadership or accountability, people acted according to their own desires, often making disastrous decisions. When individuals are not held responsible for their actions, they are more likely to stray from the right path. The same principle applies to us today. Accountability, whether through mentors, friends, or faith communities, helps us stay grounded. When we live without accountability, we become more vulnerable to making poor decisions, just like the Israelites who drifted away from God's law during the time of the judges. Lesson 2: Every human life bears the image of God. Another troubling aspect of this story is the old man's willingness to sacrifice his daughter and the Levite's concubine to protect the Levite. This reflects a twisted sense of value, where one person's life is deemed more important than another's. The lesson here is that we must recognize the equal worth of all human beings, as each person bears the image of God. This principle applies to how we treat others in everyday life. Whether it's avoiding harmful content online or treating people with dignity and respect, we must always remember that every individual is created in God's image. Lesson 3: Straying from God leads to moral decay. The book of Judges shows a nation slowly drifting away from God. The horrific events in chapters 19 to 21 are a culmination of that drift. When people stray from God's guidance, they become more susceptible to sin and destructive behavior. The same is true in our lives. If we neglect our relationship with God, we can find ourselves doing things we never imagined possible, whether it's falling into addiction, engaging in destructive relationships, or making unethical decisions. Staying close to God helps us resist temptation and live according to His will. Lesson 4: Sin has consequences beyond our control. The Israelites' civil war with the Benjamites illustrates how one bad decision leads to another. Although the men of Gibeah committed a terrible crime, the way the other tribes responded created a chain of events that spiraled out of control. Thousands of lives were lost, and even after the war ended, the Israelites had to deal with the aftermath of their actions. This teaches us that while we can choose our actions, we cannot control the consequences. Sin always carries a price, and that price often affects others. It's a reminder to think carefully about our decisions, as the impact can extend far beyond ourselves. Lesson 5: God's grace even in the midst of sin. Despite the devastation, the book of Judges ends with a glimpse of God's grace. The tribe of Benjamin, though nearly wiped out, was allowed to rebuild and restore itself. This shows that God's mercy is available even when we make destructive choices. While we must face the consequences of our actions, God offers us forgiveness and restoration if we turn back to Him. This is a powerful reminder that no matter how far we stray, it is never too late to seek God's grace and start anew. Conclusion: a call to reflect on our choices. The book of Judges concludes with the verse, "In those days, there was no king in Israel, everyone did what was right in his own eyes." This verse captures the central theme of the entire book: the dangers of living without God's guidance. This story challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we living with accountability? Are we treating others as bearers of God's image? Are we staying close to God, or have we drifted away? Most importantly, are we aware of the consequences of our actions, and do we trust in God's grace to help us make better choices moving forward? No matter where we are in life, this story reminds us that God's mercy is always available. Even when we make mistakes, He offers us a path to redemption. Let's strive to live in a way that honors God, knowing that every decision we make has consequences, but also knowing that God's grace is sufficient to restore us. Thank you for joining me in this reflection. May God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.